General Keith Alexander, thank you for joining us here in New York. I appreciate it. You were the former director of the NSA. I have a lot of questions today to cover. We want to talk about the WannaCry. We got to talk about Trump's executive order. And then, of course, there's Section 702 reform. But first, as the former director of the NSA, have you seen my browser history?
Which one?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, and we need to talk about that, right? About your kids.
My browser history?
Yeah, and a couple other. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, great.
And what about those children, huh?
Yeah, well, I got 2 kids, and
That's
they're
right.
as crazy
10
as I
and
am.
7.
10 and 7, yes, sir.
Oops.
You definitely remember things. That's perhaps why you were the director of the NSA. Let's start with WannaCry, though. Take us to the NSA right now. If you were the director and a virus hit of this scale, what would you be leading the agency to do?
I think the first thing that the government, across the government, including NSA, FBI, and others, who's doing this and what's their intent? And the reason the government's going to do that is this an attack on companies or our nation? And how do we defend our nation and our people? You want to know that. Most likely criminal in nature. And when you see something like this, that's your first thought, somebody's trying to steal money. And so the FBI has the lead. NSA would support as needed. I think the issues that come out, and you see the change in the way the newspapers are covering this, was it intentional or did it get out, shows you how hard it is for industry to do that. And so it kind of gets you back to that, how does the government and industry work together? I think things like this are extremely important to get that public-private partnership set right. Because I think this is just one of many that we're going to see. It's interesting, just to follow up on that, many people said this is the year of ransomware. And so somebody asked me, were you surprised that a ransomware attack took place? And the answer was, well, this is the year of ransomware.
Sure. Several reports, including Microsoft's president, said that this exploit was developed and then stolen from the NSA. What should the NSA's responsibility be?
Well, I think that brings up a great question. And I think there's 2 parts to this. First, the reality. The government shares most, if not all, of what they see in cyberspace.
I don't believe all, though.
Not all, most.
Come back to
not all. And in doing that, the issue really comes down to what do you keep to protect the nation and what do you share and how do you run that calculus? Now there's an equities board that the White House runs. I think from my perspective, the issue is not this tension that arises from letters like that, but the real question is how does industry and the government work together for the good of the nation? You see, because the government isn't there to spy on people who do things. It's there to get intelligence, to do things like save Jessica Buchanan. You can't do that without the right intelligence and tools. So how do we help our government do its job? And how do we protect industry and our people? And what incidents like this WannaCry or WannaCrypt does is it starts to split them apart. But our nation needs industry and the government to work together. And I think that's what we got to figure out. So our focus should first and foremost be, when the people out there, when we're looking at what's hitting us, the issue shouldn't be blame and throwing stuff. The answer is the people in the government, we should assume noble intent, and the industry, we should assume noble intent. How do we work together for the good of the nation? We're not doing that. And that's what we got to fix.
So you're saying industry, the private sector, needs to work with the public sector. There needs to be government working with the tech companies.
I think, sure. Now imagine if this was an attack on our country, okay, by a nation state. How would the government protect our country if it can't see it? And the answer, it can't protect the nation without working with industry. And that public-private partnership is the key. We should articulate and come up with a strategy for defending this country. And then, this is the nice part about being in a conference like this. The greatest set of technical minds, right? All right, here in the audience. especially the ones in green shirts. And so when you think about that, how do we work together to defend what we have, to make sure those two children are secure? How do we do that?
Is this administration, this Trump administration, the right one to bring the tech sector together with the government?
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's our country. He's our president. And let's put the political, as much as we can, put it aside, some of this, and say, so what's the right thing to do? You know, I think the nice part about having been in the military for 40 years, I couldn't get a job on the outside. The nice thing was, we were there, it didn't matter who was president, we were there for our nation, for this country. And, you know, that's a good thing to do. And when you look out here, the folks that are in the audience present the technical foundation that can help defend our country, our allies, and our way of life. The government can't do it without their help. And so this is an area where our nation is now at the same level as others like North Korea and Iran.
Sure.
If you think about cyber, we're at parity because we have so much critical infrastructure. So it becomes even more important that we think about how do we work together, despite all the political tensions that you see, and there's plenty of them. You might have missed some.
Right. So this latest exploit, the WannaCry, and you said there's going to be more. How can the American people trust the NSA when these things keep happening?
So NSA didn't use the WannaCry, a criminal did, right? And somebody stole it, one of the guys stole that. And the issue becomes, well, one, how does NSA protect its assets?
Sure.
But it's not a fact that NSA or FBI or CIA is out there trying to do damage to the country. What they're trying to do is, how do we defend this nation? And so if you think about defending our country, there are two things that can really hurt us as a nation. Terrorist attacks and cyber. Both of those require us to have capabilities that allow us to see what adversaries are doing. That means you've got to have tools, and you got to have a responsible way of defending this country and finding out the intelligence that's needed. And I think that requires people working better together. I think your actual question, if I could just change it a little bit, would be, so how do you get government and industry to work together in a way that is more defended in cases like this? So the fact that Microsoft actually put a patch out in March, how do you make sure that those things go out? And is there a way that government and industry could work together so that those things are done seamlessly and people, and the answer is yes. And should we do that? Yes.
So are you advocating for the NSA to release all the exploits they find?
No, I'm not.
Why should the NSA hoard exploits?
Why should they hoard? So the answer is they don't hoard, they release 90+% of what they get. But to go after a terrorist, you need an exploit. And so, you know, you think about 9/11 or the attack on the subways here, a planned attack that NSA helped stop was a key factor. So when you think about that, how do you give the intelligence agencies the tools they need?
Sure.
So here's my thoughts. For those of you who would say, you know, the government's doing A, B, or C, my comment would be, spend 2 years in the government and see what they do. You know, I think this is what Israel does so good. Everybody does service.
Right.
They know what their government's doing. It's not a question. But here, we don't have that much government service. I think we should have more. I think we, you know, if we took some of the talent in this room, maybe figured out some way to work it, I think it would be great. And then they would have more confidence in what the government's doing.
If some of these people went to work for our agencies, what would they discover?
What would they?
Discover. What would they learn?
Well, first, my experience, and I can give you the Jessica Buchanan, because it's amazing. In rescuing Jessica Buchanan, she was a nurse that was taken hostage by Somali pirates and was sick and would probably die in captivity. State Department had Defense Department go get her. Defense Department needed to find her, NSA helped find her, and JSOC rescued her. When that went on, the people at NSA that helped in that, you could see the young people who helped find and go through that entire operation. They don't get paid a lot, but knowing they helped save a human, a US person, meant a lot. So the first thing is, I feel that I wish the American people could see how much NSA does to protect this country. Because your first statement was hoard and made it look like NSA is a bad guy. And I would say, perhaps you ought to look at the people who are there, the hours they work, the pay they get to protect this nation.
Sure.
And I'll tell you, it was the greatest honor and privilege I had to work with these people, military and civilian, some who gave their lives to defend this country. And when you think about it, we have a wall at NSA of people who've given their lives. And when you think what you get from the press and from statements like this is, well, you're stealing, you're doing that. And the first thought ought to be, hold it. You're defending this country. What tools do you need and how do we do it? And if you make a mistake, how do we help you do it better? That would be the question.
Let's switch gears here a little bit. President Trump just signed a cyber executive order. This is something that's been in the works since early January, and in fact, you attended that first meeting with a whole bunch of cybersecurity experts, and it was behind closed doors, and they talked about cyber, I assume, and maybe your golf game, I don't know.
They were working on my golf swing?
Yeah, right there in the Situation Room, I assume. But anyway, at the time, you met with Trump, and this is the man that called on Russia to hack the DNC and loves WikiLeaks, and you called him the president America needs in regard to cybersecurity. Do you still believe that?
I think, I'm not going to defend all the tweets.
Of course.
But let me, it was interesting. Actually, the first part of this was publicized. So there was so much press in the room, I couldn't get to my chair. I had to step back. It was kind of funny. After the press left, President Trump changed from what you see publicly to a person who acted like a senior CEO, made statements, talked to everybody in the room, listened, was self-deprecating, and completely different. And that's what I meant when I said that. And I said, that's the president the American people need to see. Not somebody who is on the apprentice program, but somebody who is leading the country in areas like this to say, his questions were, how do we fix cybersecurity in the government and the nation? It's broken, what do we do to fix it? Just like you would for a senior CEO. And my comment, that's what you need. You need somebody who will step out and make decisions like that and help get it done.
So the cybersecurity order was signed late last week. Does it address your concerns?
I think it's a start. It doesn't address all my concerns. I have a lot of concerns. We don't have enough time to go over all of them, and some of them are in cyber. That's a joke. Okay, I'll work on that delivery. So when you think about the issues and what he's done, it's talking to and giving direction to the departments of what they should do and looking at how do we protect critical infrastructure. Those are the right things. And that's the first step. What we need to do, and I think what he's asked his departments and agencies to do in this executive order, is come back in the next 3 or 4 months with how they're going to do these key things. Reach out to industry and start building that team. We need to do that. So that part, yeah, I think that's right. Is it perfect? No. I don't think, we could write 1 million executive orders, none of them would be perfect. You got to start somewhere. And I think we should give him credit for saying he was going to do it and he did it. I think if, being brutally candid, I think he has the opportunity to be a great president with his experience in business. Some of the things that you see that don't make sense need to go away, but if you could put the business person and that person that we saw in that room that I saw, that's a president that everybody could say, that's what would make America great. That's what we need.
Okay. Well, some of your silly jokes ate up some of our time.
Did it?
So I'm going to skip some questions. We're going to go right to Section 702 reform. FISA is up for renewal at the end of the year, as you know. The NSA recently rolled back part of the program because it was discovered that some of the agents were violating the rights of Americans by surveilling things. Why did it take so long for NSA to reform Section 702 internally?
Well, first, I'm not sure you have it exactly right, because I don't think agents are violating. I think there's a lot of concern about the abouts.
Yep, about
And so I think what they said is there's not a lot of value in it. NSA had done that on the metadata program too, taking that to Congress in 2011, saying, hey, we can roll back these pieces. What makes 702 important? I want to give you a story on this, because 702 is vital to the protection of this nation. In 6 September 2009, NSA was tracking a terrorist in Pakistan. And that terrorist was communicating with somebody in the United States. Under 702, NSA is authorized to get those email communications and read it, to provide that information to the FBI. And what they did is they said, I see this report talks about building bombs. I give it to the FBI, it's got a name and a number in there, and the FBI can go figure out who it is. They do a national security ladder. The FBI came back to NSA and said, the name and the number belong to a guy named Najibullah Zazi, and that's his phone number. They used the metadata program to find out there was a guy in New York City. Zazi started driving across the US. The FBI swept in and arrested the people in New York a few days later, in September 14th. And in that apartment, there were bombs, several bombs in backpacks with various states of readiness. They were going to bomb the New York City subway.
And I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that the work the NSA does. But Section 702B, the About program, was found to repeatedly violate the Fourth Amendment right.
I don't agree with that. I think the issue, what you see, what you're doing is you're taking things out of context. And the reality is 702 and the metadata program are overseen by Congress, the courts, and the administration. So if somebody were willingly doing something wrong, as you insinuated, then the court, a federal judge, would hold that person liable and they could go to jail.
So then why did the NSA roll back the program?
Well, I think what they were saying is there's issues with the Abouts program. We don't see the value, and it's more about the value than it is about the issues. But I want to make it clear.
Sure.
If somebody broke the law, they would be held accountable, period. It's not like they're out there willfully doing it, because the court oversees it. It's just like a police officer. If they went in and smashed into somebody's house and they didn't have the right order, they'd go to jail. The same thing for an NSA person with these programs. So we need to be clear on that if NSA made a mistake and it was an honest mistake and they could prove that to the judge would have them go through training. But nobody, when I was there, was willfully doing anything wrong, and I've not seen that, period.
Much of the FISA program is kept away from the eyes of the Americans in secret.
Hence the name of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
Right, sure. Do the American people deserve to know more about what's going on there? Would greater transparency help restore?
Absolutely. Here's what we need to be able to do. We want all the good people to move over on this side of the room so we can tell them what's going on. And all you bad guys sit over there so you don't know how we're going to capture you. If you could do that, we could tell the American people what's going on. The reality is you can't. So what Congress, the courts, and the administration came up with was the FISA Court to oversee those programs. And so when I was there, there were 11 judges on the FISA Court. And they would rotate off. There was a 7-year stint, and they would rotate off. These are federal judges that held us accountable. And if you did something wrong, you had to go down and explain it. And so the way the American people should understand is, how does that court work? How does the administration oversee it? How does Congress oversee it? How does NSA oversee it? And then when there are problems, what did they do to fix it? I think, it's unfortunate because the court doesn't talk publicly about what they do. We actually had one judge come to Congress and talk about it. He had been the former chief of the FISA Court, Judge Bates, and he actually did a discussion with Congress and gave it to him straightforward. And I think, you know, it would be good for the American people to hear from some of the judges. If they could do that without revealing classified information, then I think it would give people, hold it, let me get this right. You've got to go to a court to get the application for these. You've got to show the court what you're doing, and you have this oversight. That's the facts. And so it's not, you know, a bunch of folks at NSA, FBI, or CIA running amok. In fact, I'll read you something. I'm going to give you a story if I could.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so you know we had Snowden. You probably didn't hear about that, but this guy Snowden took a lot of stuff. And in the summer of 2013, I was called down to the White House, and I knew they wanted a presidential review group. And so you go down to the White House and you walk in there and a sit room, and everybody's sitting on one side of the table and I was sitting on the other. And you think, well, that's odd. I took a shower. Wonder why they're all over there. And so he said, well, we're going to have a presidential review group. And I said, that's a great idea. We can have Colin Powell, we have Condoleezza Rice, we can have all these people look at it. And they said, actually, we've already made a decision. And they pushed these pile of papers across the table. The first person on, I look at board member of the American Civil Liberties Union. I said, you've got to be kidding me. I used another word.
You didn't do this in the Situation Room?
Yeah. And so the next day, this guy came up a couple days later with the panel. And he was sitting about where you are out there. And he was sitting like this. And I thought, he's looking at me like Darth Vader. And I looked at him somewhat askance. But I told them what these programs did in about an hour and a half, and then I had the young people come in and spend the next 5 weeks when they were there and walk through them every day they were up there, 100% audit of all the programs. 5 weeks later, this guy gets out and of his chair, comes up, and I thought, wow, he's a different person. And he said, you and your people have the greatest integrity of any agency I've seen. I'm going to read you a quote from him, and then I'll give you his name.
All right.
Because I prepared this.
Jordan's staring at me.
Yeah, I know, Jordan.
Here,
all right, Jordan, just 1 second. Don't hit him.
Okay.
To say I was skeptical of the NSA is in truth an understatement. I came away from my work on the review group with a view of NSA that I found quite surprising. Not only did I find that the NSA had helped to thwart numerous terrorist plots against the United States and its allies in the years since 9/11, but I also found that as an organization that operates with a high degree of integrity and a deep commitment to the rule of law. Jeffrey Stone, Presidential Review Group member, acting dean at the University of Chicago Law School at that time, and a board member of the ACLU. He and I did an op-ed later. So for the folks in the audience, here's what I tell you. If an Army officer and a board member of the ACLU can come together for the good of the country, we can help figure out how to defend this nation and do it right. And it's not by being divisive. It's by working together and figuring out a way to work together. That's what we have to do.
I agree with that. I also think it's telling, though, that you came with that statement.
I did.
Printed out.
Pretty good, huh? And I can read it.
It's like you've done this before.
I have.
So my last question, why do you do this? Why do you come to these conferences and give the same story?
Because I think nobody heard that Jeffrey Stone made that statement. It's not public. Why did the press not carry that? They carried everything that was bad about NSA, but nobody said, hold it. The guy from the ACLU that went to look at it found out that these were the best people in government. Not one person carried that story. Why is that? I would ask you that question. Because government agencies doing good doesn't sell. That's not right. And then to punish him when you see something bad, but never give him credit for all the good. You said, okay, I got good, but let's go to the bad, because it makes it more interesting, but it's actually not what the American people need to hear. They need to hear that there are good people out there trying to help this country. Those people at NSA are good people, doing the right thing.
Great. I'll let you have the last word. Thank you very much, sir.
Yep.